Okay, so quickly to the plan. We're going to talk about what intents and intent-centric protocols are, what some of the things that you need to consider around privacy for them. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and privacy solutions for the intent-solving phase more specifically. So, intent-centric protocols. So first of all, what are intents? Intents representations of user wants. So they contain constraints and preferences. Constraints are something that must be fulfilled, and preference is something that would be cool. And solvers are the actors who match intents to produce transactions. And I added some QR codes to materials about intents, but don't feel pressured. So about intent-centric protocols. So most of the protocols that exist are transaction-centric. You send transactions to the machine, and then they're ordered and executed, and then applied to the state, and the state is updated, and that's how it works. So intent-centric protocol adds another stage to that. So instead of sending transactions, users send intents to solvers. Then solvers turn intents into transactions, and then everything works as in transaction-centric protocol. So this is intent-centric protocol. And speaking about privacy, we kind of can divide it into two stages, the intent solving phase and settlement phase. And privacy, approximately what we want is that nobody knows my intents when I send them, and somehow magically they are turned into transactions. And for the transaction phase, for transaction settlement phase, we want that nobody knows anything about the data that we store on the blockchain. And this part is kind of figured out to some extent. Like there are solutions like Zcash that found privacy solutions, but the intent phase is not really figured out because intent-centric protocols don't really exist, and privacy-preserving intent-centric protocols don't exist as well. So we try to figure it out a little bit. So now a bunch of notes about this. So first one is that for how long you need privacy for such protocols. And actually, duration is different for different goals. For example, if you want to store data on the blockchain, it requires a lot of long-term privacy. Like, in Zcash, you have transactions encrypted, and ideally they would be encrypted for a long, long time, and long time, like years, something like that. But at the same time, for the solving phase, when intents turned into transactions, this is kind of like a short-term part. So you want it to be the privacy for that phase should be, less than minutes, probably. I don't know. Let's say seconds. So big difference, years and seconds. For the solving, you basically want to be able to solve simple applications. Complex applications too, they take more time, but also quite small amount of time, and it covers also some portion of MEV that is related to solving. And for settlement phase, you have this post-execution privacy for storing data, essentially, and there is also pre-execution privacy that is related to MEV. But at this point, I kind of figured that this diagram is not perfect for representing it, so I don't know how long the duration of this pre-execution privacy compared to MEV and simple applications and complex applications, so I just, made a cloud. So another thing to consider is a combination of phase privacy. So we have solving privacy, which is privacy when solving, and settlement privacy is like when the data is stored on the blockchain, everything is private. So if you have both, you got fully private protocol, that is really cool. If you only have settlement privacy, you kind of have, delayed privacy. Well, it's not a real term, but basically you send intents, and they're not private, right? So solvers solve them, and they can see everything, everyone can see everything at this stage, but then when you publish it on the blockchain, everything is private. So as long as nobody can see what's going on the intent solving stage, you're good, but it's kind of, a bit shady. At the same time, you can also have solving privacy without settlement privacy, which allows you to have somewhat unbiased solving because solvers cannot see what they're solving. They just know that something matches, and some MEV protection for the same reason. And if you don't have either, it's kind of irrelevant, no privacy at all. So other things to consider, first one is that users' tolerance doesn't really grow with protocol complexity. So if you just throw a bunch of crypto to make intense solving phase private, it's not going to really work unless it's okay with time. Another thing to be aware of is that solvers that match intents are also users, and this is the key reason for why FHE is not going to help us. This is upsetting. And a third thing to consider is that for two-phase privacy protocols, where we have both privacy at intent solving phase and settlement phase, the privacy is going to be overlapping. And here's what I mean. The diagram. So basically, because the output of the solving phase is the input of the transaction-centric part of the protocol, and what is usually input to ordering is already a shielded transaction, whatever is output from solving has to be a shielded transaction. So this is kind of difficult because solvers have to create a shielded transaction without seeing it. So now a bit more concrete. So what we expect for intent solving phase specifically is short-term to mid-term privacy, which is like not defined in numbers, but we basically want to hide intents while it's being solved. And the more complex application, the more time it takes. And we also kind of want to destroy intents after solving if we have two-phase privacy, because if the intents are floating around, it's kind of damaging for the long-term privacy. And yeah, we also remember that solvers are users. And keeping all of that in mind, we kind of consider different cryptographic approaches, and here I want to mention that we consider them from the perspective how it's going to solve the problem of adding privacy to intent solving. We just solve the full problem. At the same time, the primitives that don't really work kind of can work partially, maybe in different contexts, but here we really consider solutions that are either fully helpful or not. So the results are that MPC and TE kind of both work to some extent. If FHE doesn't work, because it's not applicable to solving, even though it allows private computations, and the rest, what we considered also doesn't really work. Yeah, so why FHE can't? I don't have time to explain this, but basically because solvers are users, they can pretend they're legit users and just brute force the intents of other users. So about MPC and TE, they kind of work, but there are a lot of details to be considered. So yeah, as I mentioned, the user tolerance doesn't grow with the protocol complexity, and here we need to be really careful because, as I mentioned, for two-phase privacy protocol, which is the ultimate goal, we need these shielded transactions be output of the solving phase, which is I don't know, kind of probably going to be more expensive than just nothing. So, MPC is maybe a bit slower, but compared to TE. But so MPC is not as flexible as TE as well, but at the same time, TEs are kind of, people don't like them. People are like, oh, TE. So this is, problematic. And also TEs are kind of, there are not a lot of options right now. So this is all to keep in mind. No solution is perfect. Yeah, but to conclude all of this, intent-centric protocols involve two phases, intent solving and transaction-centric part. Then intent-centric privacy contains these two phases, privacy plus the extra of connecting these two privacy phases. Settlement privacy solutions exist. Intent-centric privacy solutions kind of exist in theory, but in practice problematic a little bit, but I mean, all solvable. Yeah. And yeah, as the last point mentions, the solution probably is somewhere in between, including the non-cryptographic approaches. That's really all I wanted to say. So, questions?
Questions? I always thought about the privacy for the intent solving phase as being really hard to achieve for the reason that I'm always imagining this kind of order book scenario. If you want to trade, some currencies, you have two transactions, you need to match if they are a good deal for each other, right? So if they're fully private and you have n transactions, it's just exponential number of things you need to go through. I think if you have an NPC, it's probably faster. Is it actually a reasonable problem to solve? For me, it's this privacy for intent solving is so much over the head that I never conceptualize as reasonable. Is IPC solutions, are solutions reasonable? Can they be reasonable in terms of their time?
I mean, I think the solutions, the approach should be the same as for solving. So you don't really try to come up with a generalized solution for solving all possible intents. You really come up with solutions for every application, and you decide what your limits are. You don't have to support the solution that works for arbitrary number of parties, for arbitrarily complex protocols. Start with a small, and then develop your solution with the progressing in cryptography and everything. So really shouldn't think about it as solving the big problem of intent solving privacy. Just I think it's manageable if you have hard restrictions and then you just upgrade them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, lightning talk, lightning Q&A. We will have to move on. Thank you so much, Yulia.